Well, thank you so much for this great event, which helped us a lot to understand different dynamics of the far-right politics. And today I will talk about another dimension, which we have worked on in the last couple of years in this project, which is the transnationalization of the far-right politics. So, well, as we can see here in these pictures, from the formation of alliances in European Parliament to street-level protests that take place in different European countries, far-right actors, different far-right actors have increasingly engaged in transnational activities recently. And we believe that if you want to understand the rise of far-right politics, we need to understand this transnational dimension as well. And in our approach and AUTHLIB project, we adopted a more agentic and social movement theory-inspired understanding that focus on actors, their interactions, actions, and perceptions. And we covered mainly three major dimensions of the transnationalization of far-right politics, which are construction of shared frames and narratives, the formation of organizational networks, and the organization of joint practices and cooperative activities. So in the last couple of years, we conducted different type of research with different type of methodological approaches, as you can see here. And today, it's really hard to cover everything within 15 minutes, but I will do my best to share some insights and interesting findings that are important to understand this recent trend of transnationalization. Well, let's start with the framing strategies. Well, we conducted a social media-based content analysis to check what are the most popular, frames that the far-right actors used on their Facebook accounts to discuss different policy fields. And what we have observed that, we have some usual suspects like immigration and gender as the most common ones that are, mainly discussed by the far-right actors by using illiberal frames. But also in the countries like Italy, France, and the UK, there's an increasing emphasis on the social policy-related issues like workers' rights, farmers' rights, pensions, social assistance programs, which are kind of, understandable. But I think there's a more important issue that we need to discuss, which is the intellectual investment in the construction of and the diffusion of new frames, new master frames that can be used by different actors for different purposes. The master frames that we mostly use in social movement studies are the, common ideas or the frames that are flexible and broad that can be used for different purposes by a variety of actors. And recently, we also, in our data, we have observed that there is this, a significant investment in the construction and diffusion of the anti-woke position, which explains perfectly this transnationalization process of the far-right actors because far-right politics, because anti-wokeness emerged in the US context to criticize the woke position or the woke culture, and it was not necessarily a conservative or far-right position, but also it was, the anti-woke criticism was also used by the left-wing actors to criticize the woke culture by accusing it of serving to the capitalist and consumerist practices of the culture and entertainment industry. And it immediately adopted by the far-right actors, and it turned into a master frame to be used for criticizing any type of progressive movements and values in the recent political context. So you can be a lifelong feminist for 50 years, but you are woke now. You can defend immigrant rights, but you are woke now. You can, you can defend religious minorities' rights, but you are woke now. So far-right actors use this master frame for different purposes, and it diffused to the European context as well. So I think we can all know, we can always say that in countries like Italy, France, Hungary, Netherlands, Belgium, there is this increasing tendency to, criticize the woke culture and, any progressive movements by just labeling them as woke. And it's important, actually, particularly to understand its diffusion to the European context, because in this process, it also gained a nativist perspective. So the wokeness or anti-woke position was also about to protect the national and local cultures against not only the Muslim invaders or the cultural Marxists, but also against the US-based imperialism, the cultural imperialism. So there's a very strong nativist and nationalistic tendency in this process of adoption of the woke or anti-woke position in the European context, which actually explains the importance of the frames, the common frames and shared narratives in this transnationalization and diffusion process of the far-right politics across different countries. And particularly the online networking activities are important to share these ideas, to diffuse these ideas. And we conducted a social network-based research to understand actually which actors are the most node-like actors that are the hubs for this transnationalization process. And what we have observed that, well, the anti-gender actors, for example, are the most connected ones. And the civil society actors, for example, function more as the brokers, while the political parties and grassroots movements focus more on national networking activities. And more importantly, there are some countries with higher levels of transnationalization tendencies, which are, in our cases, Hungary and France. But these analyses actually demonstrate that while these two actors are important in transnationalization processes, its type, its form is different from each other. In the case of France, for example, we have parties more like political party figures like Marine Le Pen or Reconquête and Zemmour that function as the role models, so the other actors try to be connected with them on their social media accounts, while in the case of Hungary, it's more like civil society actors like Center for Fundamental Rights that function as the major actors that bring different actors together in online platforms. But while these online activities are important, I believe that the more important part is the transnational events. In the literature, also in our research as well, we know that their numbers, the numbers of transnational events are very small compared to the national ones. But still, they're very significant in this transnationalization process because of their functions, actually. In these events, actors actually, actors learn from each other. So there is this mutual learning and exchange of ideas, and they're also very important to increase their visibility, reputation, and legitimacy through the participation of these events. And more importantly, I think, the emotional and cognitive needs are satisfied in these events. So when the actors participate in these, protests, conferences, summits, they feel like they're not alone, which I will talk a bit later. So these events function as kind of the backbone for these transnationalization processes. And we conducted an event chronology-based research to understand actually which type of transnational events or activities these far-right actors engaged in the last couple of years. And what we have seen here is the top two popular type of activities are the expression of support, which means that the actors doesn't need to use any resources because releasing a public statement, just sharing a Facebook post, sending a message can be considered as an expression of support. While in the other popular one is the transnational meetings, which is the most resource demanding one, which requires actors to use money, time, human resources to go to another country, to engage in some transnational events, a conference, a summit, etc., or a protest. And despite this issue, we can see that in this picture, which covers actually the Facebook page of the selected actors for 9-month period around the European Parliament elections of 2024, that far-right transnational meetings are very, very important for these actors. And in the second graph, we can see more interesting finding, which is how actually different type of actors, care a lot about these transnational events. For political parties, it's not a big deal, but especially for smaller actors like cultural organizations or the political movements, it means a lot. And this is important because actually they don't have much money or resources, yet still they care about these transnational events. They care about these protests and conferences, which raised a question for us that, okay, but under which conditions these actors decided to engage in these activities, while under which conditions they feel more distanced. And we conducted many interviews, more than 40, to check actually some facilitators and inhibitors to understand their motivations to participate or distance themselves from these transnational activities. And on the right side, we can see actually, and here you can see some interview extracts. And what we have observed is that, well, lack or scarcity of the material sources like money or time or human resources, and also some legal concerns to be, affiliated with some extremist groups can be considered as some inhibitors that prevent these far-right actors, particularly grassroots and the political movements and some civil society organizations, from engaging in transnational activities. Here you can see, for example, an interview finding from the interview with the Ordo Juris representative, in which he mentioned that time and money are two factors which hinder our cooperation with organizations from other countries. And other cultural inhibitors can be considered as the movement legacies, which means that, for example, in the case of France, that we conducted many interviews, Well, many actors mentioned that they don't want to be affiliated with the German and the British one because of the historical reasons. And one of the major challenges for these actors that seek transnational engagement is to, convince their comrades that it's not a problem to, come together with Germans or the British ones. And here, as you can see in the second interview extract on the right, for example, there is this emphasis on popular French-centric mentality and fixation on Germany as rival and enemy. And this is also important because another issue that we observe is that, well, sometimes the far-right actors, because of the political marginalization in their country, believe that no one in the world can understand them. So there is no need to go to these transnational activities because, well, for a French activist, for example, Germans will not understand because the French is a very unique case that cannot be understood by the other actors. So they kind of have a distance from other actors and these kind of transnational activities. However, there are also important facilitators, like, again, the usual suspects, the strategic learning, so learning from each other and seeking for reputation and legitimacy enhancement through these activities function as important organizational facilitators that lead these actors to engage more and more in these transnational events. But also, there's some emotional, cognitive and cultural factors, which I find very fascinating. And in every qualitative research, there's one quotation that can work perfectly for your case, which is this one. And thankfully, it's from also Italy. And it's from the guy from Movimento Nazionale, one of the leading nationalist movements in Italy. And here in this interview, we can see actually seeking solidarity and emotional support are the significant drivers of the transnational engagement. And more importantly, these events also reaffirm their moral position, which is, I think, an interesting finding because in the interviews we realized that, well, participating in the national activities doesn't satisfy these needs. As you can see here, he mentioned that we are minority. We are always counteracted by everyone in Italy. So when they participate in these national events, they don't feel this satisfaction. But when they participate in transnational events, they feel like they're not alone anymore. There are people like them in other countries, so their fight is not useless. So this emotional dimension is very significant one, which is a bit also neglected in the literature, but we believe that we need to understand this emotional and cognitive issue of reaffirmation of the moral position and seeking solidarity through online participation as important factors to understand this transnationalization pattern of the far-right politics. So at the end, as I said, we used a more social theory-based understanding to capture not only political parties, but also civil society actors, political movements, social movements as well, because we believe that they are very important, and as we can see here in our data set as well, they are the important actors of this transnationalization process, and without understanding their role, it's very hard to understand this rising trend of transnationalization across Europe. And our data set and our research demonstrate that there is this division of labor and heterogeneity among the far-right actors. Different subsectors and different countries take part in different roles, so it's not an automatic process. We need to understand this division of labor and its dynamics through understanding these micro, meso, and macro level drivers and dimensions of the recent transnationalization of far-right politics through the analysis of construction of new master frames, the expansion of networks, and the participation in the in-person meetings. And yes, in the far-right literature, we discuss a lot about ideology and strategy, but our research and all other actually interview-based research demonstrate that, well, there is also other dimension, which is cognitive and emotional needs that also should be taken care of, that also should be analyzed through more qualitative-based research to understand the meaning of these far-right transnationalization and the activities related to this process. So, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm always ready to answer your questions in this conference and later. Thank you.